Well, welcome to the Valley Hoops Insider podcast, part of the Valley Hoops Insider website. Harry Schroeder, host of the site, and that dashing young man on the other side of the screen there is Rocco Miller. He's from bracketeer.org, and uh, just a terrific website if you want to pay attention to how things are playing out throughout the year related to teams getting in or out of the tournament. A lot more than just that, but that's kind of the bread and butter that Rocco works on. First of all, I contacted you last week, Rocco, because I thought I haven't talked to him in too long. I feel like I was cheating on a friend or something.
Well, I'm always happy to join you, Harry. It's the off season flew by. I think the last time we talked was heading into last year's Arch Madness, maybe a few weeks before that. But I've been well. I helped quite a few programs, even especially teams in the Valley with their non-conference schedules, and just basically connecting coaches everywhere from the East Coast to the West Coast and in between. And really where I think, add the most value to coaching staffs is effectively, if you're not a power 5 or 6 conference team. So the Valley is really in my sweet spot, along with teams out here in the Mountain West and the WCC and the Atlantic 10 out in the East, because those are the teams that really need to create more opportunities to build a resume, because they're not going to get as many bids come Selection Sunday. So that's really where the passion started from, but then it just spilled into all sorts of scheduling from any date of November or December. It really just kind of took on a life of its own. But it's been a great way to really engulf myself into the community of coaching, and I really love the relationship aspect of doing all this. And so it's great to be back on with you, Harry.
I had no idea you helped coaches do that. That's spectacular. Every coach I talk to, they talk about the difficulty of putting together a schedule because of the date issues, the bye games, all of those kinds of things that they have to navigate.
Yeah.
So I had no idea you were doing that. I know that you are, for people like me and fans, you're a great resource as you're cranking out schedules that maybe nobody else knows about. You routinely are putting those things out there so I can find out who is playing who when in the off season.
Yeah, and I mean that's one element of it too. And I think half the motivation for doing that. I'm glad it helps fans and media members like yourself start making some early plans. But it's also to just get the word out to some of the other coaches that might have thought they were playing a certain team, because you never know until the contract is signed, Harry. So some of those I have to delete later because they'll tell me it's done. And then the next day they find out that the team didn't sign and they might go another direction. So it really is a lot of following up and making sure the deal gets done. But it's cool to be a part of. And eventually, if I'm able to work with every single league and every single team at some level, we can do a lot more with it and be a lot more creative with it. And that's the long-term goal.
That's spectacular. You're also one of the top bracketologists in the country. How did your bracket fare last year? And do you interact with or communicate with some of those other maybe bigger name bracketologists that we all know because of they work on the 4-letter networks or wherever they might be?
Yeah, Harry, I've been at it a long time now. So I have actually started working with some of the bigger names. So Joe Lenardi and I both happened to be at the WCC tournament last year, and that was we had met a few times over Zoom calls and emails, comparing notes and just talking about teams. But that was really unique because we actually got to, behind the scenes, spend a lot of time together and right at the most crucial time, the start of March, and talk about a lot of different opportunities that we might pursue in the future. So that's exciting. And behind the scenes, Joe's a really awesome guy. And I give him a ton of credit for creating this whole bracketology space and world, back in 1996. It's been almost 3 decades worth of this now. And it's just so ingrained into the culture. And I think the thing about my work I've always wanted to do is educate fans on the process, to set realistic expectations, because I do think there are a lot of misnomers. Some of that is ESPN's fault. I do, I do think they lead fans on to believing their team's going to get in when it's really not true. But beyond that, it's a fascinating process, and I'm fortunate to serve on a couple mock selection exercises that allow us to go through the exact same voting process. So we know exactly what each committee member does in the order they do it. And we do that. I'm on two different of those exercises. One of them's the first week of March, and then the second one's the second week of March. So in between games, I'm juggling those calls. Sometimes we're just texting in our votes. So it's not the exact same of being stuck in the same room as other people, but beyond that, the process is the same. As for my bracket last year was a super interesting year because on Saturday of championship week, a lot of upsets happened. Virginia Tech blew out Duke. Texas A&M looked like they were getting in after they beat Arkansas. Didn't turn out to be the case. A few others, we won't go into that many details, but effectively, if you trace the process back to Friday, it's as if the committee finished their work 2 days early, which is something I've always talked about, and I'm a little bit kicking myself for not just doing that. Had I made that decision, you probably could go back and look at my Saturday morning posts from last year, and it's a lot better than my Sunday morning post. So it's a tough lesson learned because every committee is different. We've seen committees take those Saturday results into account. They've had time to do it, but this last year, it just looked like they didn't do it, and that was a major bummer because when you're getting scored on the matrix, it's got a huge variance on your final score. I still had a solid score. I'm not complaining, but it could have been a lot. I mean, I probably could have been maybe number one if it was like the Saturday morning bracket. So very interesting process as always.
Is there a championship belt or something? Do you spray champagne on yourself if you win? Like, how does that all play out?
I've never won it, but I hope to do it one of these years. I feel like I'm pretty close every year. Yeah, I don't know. I think you just get a lot of different congratulations from all corners of the internet. I've noticed that when other people have won, people I didn't even think were paying attention, going out and tweeting about it. So it always blows my mind. It will continue to blow my mind how popular all of this is.
If I recall properly, your preseason thinking, you were pretty
Yeah.
bullish on Southern Illinois out of the Valley rather than Drake. Some of
Well,
the Drake was a preseason favorite by the league writers and all of those kinds of things. But it seemed to me you had the Salukis just tweaked a little higher than the Bulldogs.
yeah. So actually, the Bulldogs are my regular season pick, and I think the Salukis are better built for Arch Madness, which is why I went ahead and gave them the
The
nod
auto bid.
the auto bid for the bracket. So I do my preseason a little different than most. I actually pick a regular season champion and a tournament champion because these teams have different strengths and weaknesses for that tournament setting. I think SIU clearly has the best defense in the league, and I think that's going to help them a ton come Arch Madness, no matter what place they finish in, to make a run. But obviously, if they shoot the way they did against Southern Indiana, that's going to be not a good recipe for success. But the Bulldogs, I have them ranked as my number 2 mid-major team across, any non-power league right now. They're extremely strong. They're breaking Wilkins and others back in from injury. A little bit of a struggle last night against Wofford, but they got the job done. And we'll learn a lot about them in the coming weeks when they play in their tournament. There's a couple other big games they got around that as well. So I'm excited to see what Drake can do. I would love to see them, win 10 or 11 of their non-conference games to have a chance at an at-large for a 2-bid Valley. But beyond that, I think when Bradley gets fully healthy, they'll be pretty difficult to beat. They're obviously shorthanded without the big man. And then Missouri State, a little interesting. We haven't seen really what they're going to do with all these newcomers. We'll start to learn about them this week. They'll play BYU tomorrow, and they'll play Middle Tennessee, a very veteran team, this upcoming weekend. So we'll learn about them real quick here. And another team I'm high on early on is the Sycamores of Indiana State. I thought
good.
Yeah, I thought the DePaul transfer McCauley was a real nice addition. Obviously, an old team. And Schertz has been with a lot of these guys for a while now. So I think if there is a real dark horse that can make noise, I think it's the Sycamores.
Well, listen to him breaking it down from the left coast out there. This is not a guy that just hangs out there. Hey, I do want to ask you, a number of years ago, the Missouri Valley and the Mountain West had their Mountain West Missouri Valley Challenge, and that was a great thing, I think, for both leagues for several years. Mountain West pulled out. I think they pulled out more than the Valley did, meaning I think the Valley would have preferred to keep it going more than obviously the Mountain West did. And the Mountain West has separated itself a little bit from the Missouri Valley in terms of, if you look at Ken Palm or those kinds of things. What's the secret sauce there? Is it merely that the Mountain West schools are in bigger communities, bigger markets, and have more resources, or what became the separation there?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't gotten a clear answer from it, but my assumption and some of the programs I've worked with, so I work with programs in both leagues. That's been the indication. It's over the time where it got canceled because basically the first year of COVID pushed it back a year, or was supposed to be a year. And I think after that year, you really saw teams like Colorado State step up. San Diego State's good every year. This last year, Wyoming emerged, but I think Nevada had a good year the year before. And then also you got the football element of the Mountain West makes them a lot more well-financed. I don't know how big of a deal the finances played into it, more or less, than the strategic side of having a scheduled game against a team from the Valley. You know, if you go back 4 or 5 years ago, the two leagues were basically even. I think that's when the concept came together. And I think when the Mountain West started seeing some of these teams start to ascend, I didn't even include Boise State in there, and Utah State made the tournament 3 straight years before last year. So I think they just looked at it and said, listen, we're getting like close to 4 bids each year, sometimes close to 5. Valley's getting 1 or 2. Chances are we're better off just going off and scheduling on our own. And that's unfortunate for the Valley, of course.
So if the Valley Commissioner Jeff Jackson was going to try to put something together like that, what's a logical league for them? Obviously the A10, Conference USA are kind of leagues right in above them in the Ken Palm ratings. But do you think there's a league that makes sense that they wanted to put together one of those kinds of challenges?
Yeah, I think Conference USA might be the best bet at this point. If they would have done it this year, it would have been great, because Conference USA has got 5 really solid teams, and UTEP's a really strong 6th team. I think this would have been the year. But next year, everything gets shaken up because 6 different Conference USA teams are going to the American. And then you've got a handful of American teams going to the Big 12. So I feel like Conference USA is going to have to settle in again. And I don't even know how strong they'll be, because they're losing UAB, North Texas, Florida Atlantic, 3 of those 5 teams I was alluding to, and UTEP as well, right? So so I think maybe Conference USA, if you can't get them, if Gonzaga leaves the WCC starts to become pretty much on par with the Valley again, and those could be some awesome matchups. I would love to see that. So those are some future, pieces of food for thought.
Yeah, I really missed that Mountain West Missouri Valley Challenge. There were some great games, and then, like I said, those leagues have separated some, and so it doesn't make sense for the Mountain West potentially. And so I think I love those kinds of things. MTE season is coming upon us this week and next, and then of course there's another jumbled up, and we do it again a little bit later in the holiday season. Is there an MTE out there for mid-major kind of schools that are engaged that you're particularly paying attention to this week or in the next couple of weeks?
Well, I'm certainly paying attention to all of them, Harry, but I would say the one that kind of stands out, I'm just trying to think of with the Valley. Drake's in one that I think they can win. I would pick them to win the one they're in. They're down there in the Bahamas. I think they're actually down there with Belmont as well, because it was contracted before Belmont joined the Valley. But they're on opposite sides of the bracket. Buffalo's down this year. That's who Drake opens with.
They play that on campus, yeah.
That will actually be in the islands.
It is.
Yeah. But the second round game, it was going to be a daunting game against Wyoming, but Wyoming, Graham Ike, the big man, he's out a month, and I think Drake can knock him off, which would help a ton resume wise if they can get to the final and knock off Wyoming. Wyoming opens with Howard, so I do expect Wyoming to be okay in the first round. And then on the opposite side, it's either going to be Belmont, a Boston College team that's really looked bad. They lost to Maine last night, or George Mason, who's got a dominant big man. So they might see George Mason. Could be an all Valley final if it all comes together. It's not unthinkable. But Drake's one that I think they can actually go and get 3 wins. Southern Illinois is a team I'll actually I'll have next Monday. I'll be there in person at the SoCal Challenge, and they've got a really interesting event. They're playing UNLV in the first game, almost like a toss-up on paper, I would say. Really depends on which Southern Illinois team we're going to see, and UNLV's got a lot of different trapping concepts defensively. They're playing Dayton tonight. We're going to learn a lot about them tonight. So that's the opener, and then on the other side, it's I think the other two teams might be weaker. Minnesota has not looked good, blown out by DePaul last night. They play California Baptist, a team I like a lot on paper, but lost their opener to Long Beach State, so they're still trying to figure things out there. So Southern Illinois, another team, they're in an event that's right there for the taking to get 2 wins that will really help their resume if they can get them.
When I think about Valley teams trying to get to the national tournament, and you know better than all of us that how difficult that is for a team out of the Missouri Valley Conference. They've got to be great in the non-conference. They've got to be really good in the regular season, barring the whole winning the tournament, those kind of things.
Yep.
But when I think about that, we've talked about Southern Illinois a couple times. They get just a really nice win against Oklahoma State. And so Oklahoma State's not awesome, but they are in the Big 12, and they will have some kind of a resume behind them that'll help Southern quite a bit. But then they go lay an egg. Mike Reese, their basketball announcer, called it the other night at the end of the game an 18-point no-show. That's what he called his team, and so I feel bad for Brian Mullins and those guys. But for us guys out here in the peanut gallery, good win, pretty good win. Bad loss, although Southern Indiana really is going to surprise some people. They're a lot better than people think. Yeah. How do those things get processed out in the committee as they're making those decisions?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you're a Salukis fan, you got to be a big Oklahoma State fan the rest of the year and hope they finish top half of the Big 12. I penciled Oklahoma State in as a tournament team. I think they were the last Big 12 team I had in as like 6th place team preseason. A lot of talent on that team. SIU did a fantastic job, held them to 25% 3-point shooting, forced 10 steals, just did enough to eke that thing out. Outscored them by 9 in the last 10 minutes to kind of take the win away from the Cowboys. And then obviously the USI game, that was just a disaster from deep. Damask shot 0 for 7 from deep. Both Jones and Brown shot 1 for 4 from deep. And overall, they just got completely outplayed from start to finish, as you said. I would say when it comes down to the end, you have to root for all these teams. If it's a good win, a bad loss, to turn into like a decent loss and a great win, you start becoming a fan of that team pretty much instantly. So that's what Saluki fans will need to do. But overall, I think the committee looks at it as, there's really no set formula, because if Southern Illinois somehow ends up on the bubble, you're going to have a cluster of other teams they'll be compared against. And so you have things you like, you have things you don't like. Obviously, you don't like that loss, but it is on the road. And if Southern Indiana finishes top 200 or top 150, you could probably live with that, right? But if they finish around 300, that's really going to stand out probably when compared to other teams that don't have anything close to that bad of a loss. So it really just depends. And Valley teams are tougher to compare anyway, because the data is so much more limited. If you're comparing Southern Illinois to Rutgers, for example, and Rutgers has played 20 teams in Q1 and top of Q2, you're comparing that against like maybe 2 or 3 games that SIU will get a chance at. So you have to take everything with a grain of salt. SIU's metrics will probably come into play a little bit more because of that. So usually your own net doesn't matter, but in their case, it could. And again, we're using them as an example. You can apply this to Drake, or if the Sycamores have some magic or somebody else, same logic applies.
Before I let you go, I'll be at the St. Louis U Memphis game tonight, and the Billikens have started. They won their first couple of games, and I'm very high on the Billikens. They haven't looked great yet. I mean, in their 2 wins, but I'm very high on the Billikens. I think Yuri Collins might be the best point guard in the nation. They're really good. I wonder, when you look at that Atlantic 10 conference, and everybody picked Dayton number 1, SLU number 2. I just wonder how you look at the A10.
Yeah, so well, I'm excited for the matchup. I think it's a win. St. Louis got to find a way to get it. Memphis is different this year because they're a lot older, more experienced. Obviously, Kendrick Davis, the superstar from SMU, transferred within the conference to come play for Memphis. So he'll be a load to handle. But I'm hearing he might not be 100%. If not, that obviously helps the Bills. As a whole, for the A10, I do think the Billikens are a tournament team. I think I had them in the first four squeaking in. And part of that, nothing against Travis Ford. I mean, we've always had a good relationship. But the proof in the pudding, he's had a lot of bad luck there. Obviously, the injury last year, injuries in multiple years, in fact. I just want to see them put a good season together, him prove he can get them to the dance. So I do put a little bit more trust into coaches that have done it and been there. He still hasn't, but I do have a really good feeling about this team, and I think the upside's tremendous. Dayton's down their point guard right now. We'll see how they fare at UNLV tonight, but Dayton's got a ton of big games, as does SLU, and as does VCU. So I think between the three, it's up for grabs. But I do think a full strength Dayton is clearly the favorite. Just because they're loaded if they have Holmes and Malley and all those guys rolling, which I think they could have by the second half of the season. But I think some of the other interesting teams, George Mason with the Duro, very interesting. Davidson coming out of the gates kind of slow, but they found ways to win those games ugly. I think they're only going to get better as the season goes on. I'm impressed with Matt McKillop. I think the analytics are going to be a big part of that program going forward. Richmond is solid. Obviously, a tough loss last night in a wild game. Loyola Chicago should be solid, as we know. So, and some of the bottom teams, even though they won't be tournament contenders this year, they're starting to look better than maybe we expected. Duquesne's been pretty impressive for what we thought they were. George Washington played Hofstra really tough last night. Chris Caputo takes over that George Washington program. And LaSalle with Fran Dunphy, they're going to be feisty and a pain in everybody's butt all year. And so I think even the bottom of the league is going to give the top of the league some trouble.
And that really helps the league, doesn't it? When your bottom teams start playing better, I think the Missouri Valley might not be as top heavy, but I think it's better at the bottom than it has been. And so it's interesting to watch those dynamics as things play out throughout the season. Rocco, appreciate your time today and joining us from the way out west. And it's amazing to me how much you know about every stinking team, league, all that. And I know you have to for what you're doing, but it just blows my mind how you rattle all that stuff off, and I get smarter every time we talk.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, and thanks for the kind words. It's probably a little bit of a sickness, but I love the challenge of comparing teams from completely different styles to different leagues, and it's tough. A lot of times it's hard to get the right answer, but I think there's so many different reasons to love college basketball, and if you can see it holistically the way I see it, I think it's a lot more enjoyable. And there's so many great stories to tell, and that's my favorite part of the early part of the season before some of these teams, their seasons will fall apart later. Now's the time to get them some credit and pay attention to them. And we know we're going to have the Blue Bloods later in the year, so we don't really need to focus on them yet.
That's Rocco Miller. Head to his website, bracketeer.org. You're going to learn so many different things by getting on his website. And where can they find you on Twitter or other places, Rocco?
Yeah, I'm at Twitter, at Rocco Miller 8 is my Twitter handle. You can find me there. That's probably the best place for instant information. Of course, bracketologists.org is the website that I own. And it's beginning next week, we'll start doing our Teams of the Week awards. We missed that this week due to some travel, but looking forward to doing that. Bracket updates will be regular beginning in January all the way through March, twice a week. And then I'm appearing on a variety of platforms. I'm typically on Field of 68 with Jeff Goodman's platform and other places, but the Twitter handle will keep you updated.
Appreciate it. Appreciate your time. Wish you all the best. We'll catch up soon.
Sounds good, Harry. Thank you very much.
That's Rocco Miller, bracketeer.org. Thanks for joining us today. Remember, since you've been there, make it a better place. We'll see you again real soon.